Hi, everybody. This is Eric, and you're watching The Red Lettuce. And we have a special guest with us. We have Val with the new. There's a new campaign out there. It's called The Queers Against Pete, and we have Val with us. And we are going to talk about what this campaign's about. So, Val, please introduce yourself and let us know more about this campaign.
Yeah. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for having us on this show to talk about Queers Against Pete. I'm Val. I live in Chicago, been here for a little while. I'm a community organizer among certain groups, and I was a signatory for the Queers Against Pete campaign. And I'm pretty much here just representing the organizing group, so I can kind of explain some things if you want.
Yeah, actually, but before you do that, before we go into what Queers Against Pete is really about, maybe we can kind of talk about what we hear all the time when people defend Pete. Mm-hmm. People say, "Well, he's gay, so he must be progressive. That must mean he's a progressive guy, or he's not racist, and he's for all these progressive things, right? Isn't gay being enough?" Let's talk about why that might not be enough at all.
Yeah, so at least for just my own personal feelings about that is that Pete has... So are you both familiar with the term intersectionality?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, intersecting identities. Pete is still a white, cisgender, well-to-do, I believe, man who, at this time in his life came out. He realized he's gay. I'm happy for him, but that doesn't change his perspective or his experience. And it clearly shows because of the way he's making political decisions on what he is running his campaign on, and just even how he's sort of represented South Bend or Indiana as a whole, being mayor. And it clearly shows he does not consider the most marginalized of his own LGBTQIA community. So, I mean, he just furthers white supremacy. It's spewing out of him, kind of. It's gross.
Yes, it is. It's very repulsing. We've talked about that on the show as well, about the issues with Pete Buttigieg and how he handles certain things, and how he doesn't address certain issues that affect marginalized people in our community and outside of our community as well. Also, I think there's a lot of talk about Pete Buttigieg is the face of this or that, you name it, whatever. He's like a psycho, or he is I think he is a psycho, but he's the face of imperialism and things like that, which I agree with. But there's also something that's not really talked about enough in our community, which is very toxic and dangerous, which is homonormativity and homonationalism. And I think Pete Buttigieg really is the face of that. Maybe we can talk about what that means and why that is so toxic in our community, that whole mentality of homonormativity and homonationalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I actually had to Google those before I came, and I realized that I recognized the terms, but I just didn't know there was actual words for that. So really, really helpful. But yeah, I feel like what I understand from those terms is that it's sort of assimilating the LGBTQIA community to heteronormative values and nationalistic values of we'll focus on the U.S. for this sake. But I feel like, Pete is kind of like the embodiment of it in certain ways, because he is this... I think that he gets so much attention for being this war hero, and it makes people feel a lot of pride in their country, and that he's resilient because he's gay, and the don't ask, don't tell policy, and then he's come out of that war or wars, and now he's also fighting his own personal war of this LGBTQ discrimination, maybe, but he doesn't actually experience that at all. So I definitely think that if you have more specific questions around it, but I definitely feel like, yeah, he is pushing a lot through his own actions of like expecting a lot of queer and trans people to conform to things that are very capitalistic.
Yeah.
And, he really, like, I feel like he really values militarization and police and, like, feels that those things are best for the LGBTQ community. But, again, he doesn't really think about the most marginalized in our communities, and those are Black and brown people. And I think that I think that he could actually communicate with them, and I know that he's not gotten a lot of voters like of Black and brown communities that I've heard of so far. But,
Yeah.
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 Question. So heteronormative in this context, could it mean also the fact that he he could pass for straight? Like,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that the idea is like that he's so conformist in terms of like his personality that he could easily pass for straight and be completely accepted in straight society. There's nothing unusual or even kind of like unique about him. He's a template for like like a neoliberal politician.
Oh yeah, the neoliberalism.
And he,
for sure.
just the look, the sound of his voice, the way he presents himself, it's all very staged. I mean, a lot of them are staged, just not to say that he's the only one. But he definitely plays this kind of plays to the conformity of like, yeah, this is where, it's almost the suggestion to me is like, this is where, if you're not straight, if you're anything but straight, if you arrive to this point, you've become part of society as a whole, as like the status quo.
Right. Yeah. Like, I think he definitely embodies homonormativity and homonationalism. It's a very excludes a lot of people within our community. If you don't fit the straight model, if you don't assimilate to the capitalist system, straight, cisgender, patriarchal way of life, then you're not welcome in our community. You're not welcome in this society. You're othered. It's very exclusionary. And I think Pete really embodies that, especially the imperialist part. It's the idea that Western civilizations and nations are the beacons of LGBTQIA rights and things of that nature. But even though the United States, in 31 states, you can be discriminated against in housing if you're trans. There's scores of homeless people in our community because they can't find housing. There's no federal laws protecting us in 31 states. But let's talk more about your campaign.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to know, like, what are the main, what's the main case? Like, is it possible to summarize it in a nutshell? Like, what's the main case of the campaign against him?
Yeah, because you guys lay out some really good points on your site.
Yeah.
That which is why we should be against Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah. So from my understanding, it started fairly recently. I don't know how far into the, all the Democratic debates and all of that that Queers Against Pete actually initiated itself, but I know that it's been around for a couple months at least. And the main points that I understand is that it's trying to make sure that somebody who wants to ride on the platform of LGBTQIA people has to actually be accountable and responsible to that community. And Queers Against Pete is sort of that accountability response and through a campaign. And they say, the ancestors, transcestors of The movement, the queer movement, are like Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, and we have to honor those people the most. And like you were saying just a second ago, a lot of people are still, without housing, without health care. Pete is against certain actions of bringing universal health care, relieving student debt, all these things that are, if you keep going down the ladder of, you have this identity and this identity, you're definitely going to be the most affected. So it's really to point out that he is writing the identity of a lot of us and using it to exploit for his benefit, and that, I think that is the summary pretty much. Like, there's a lot of other things I could get into, but, I know that over 2,500 people have signed so far, and that's actually internationally. So all 50 states, a few different other countries. And the other thing is Queers Against Pete doesn't have, what's that word? They don't endorse a certain candidate, but they definitely don't want to see Pete, progressing anymore. And the earlier to get this attention, the better, and we want it out there.
I was just thinking about like Pete in the context of like Lori Lightfoot, our mayor.
Oh my gosh,
here.
yeah.
That's another great
And
example.
it's so interesting because like she ran on like a real progressive platform that that this would be like really a big change, just like kind of Barack Obama ran on that kind of platform too. And then we find they get in office and it's like unbelievable, like the lack of progressive courage that she has is like every week there's something that comes out, that a decision she's made. I think the latest was that she wants to endorse Bloomberg.
That's unbelievable.
I was floored.
Yeah.
Floored.
Did you hear about that?
Yeah, I would also say that, Lori Lightfoot's always been a capitalist, and a lot of the queer community spent a fair amount of time organizing to make sure she wouldn't get in office. It was not successful, obviously, but I felt like this was, it would seem obvious that she was going to ride this platform, and then she actually is even worse than we thought.
Yeah,
like she's
like
just
Rahm
not.
Emanuel.
Yeah, like she has no shits to give. She's just full at it, and there's been some campaigns where she of like organizing communities that she's actually banned from even being in City Hall now. So like people can't even go and actually get their advocacy work done because
she won't meet with them.
She won't meet with them, but she's also tired of them crowding the hallways, and that's their given right to be there.
Right.
And,
We've actually experienced that personally, our group, that she won't meet with. Well, her staff will meet with us just to say, oh, yeah, we recognize that you're here, because we had a lot of people, but she won't meet with us, and if she's not she has no environmental conscience. She has her concerns are limited, and she won't.
She's
touch
concerned about the
certain
ruling
things.
elite. That's who she serves. Is the ruling elite and the capitalist class.
It certainly seems like from what we've seen so far, yeah. And then she has this this super PAC thing now going, where it's all about powerful women, but it's like these aren't any women. These are women that are like close to the billionaire class, like corporate heads, and they're not everyday women. They're like the elite, So I guess I just see some very interesting parallels between like Pete and a politician like her. And she's not really she doesn't even have any experience. Like both of these people have limited experience in terms of like being a political figure. And they're just totally right down the center to me.
Yeah, they're very much alike. They are serving the billionaires, the ruling elites. They're not wanting to change the status quo at all. They want to keep it the same. They're very assimilationist. They're very homonormative. But I kind of want to talk about some of the concerns about why Pete should not be elected, and how dangerous he really is. Like, you guys have a really great list, and one of those points on the website say that Pete Buttigieg hasn't come out in support of a moratorium on ending deportations or decriminalizing the border. And a lot of people in our community, especially the white cisgender gay men and women, don't understand is that people in our community get deported too. And Pete doesn't care about that either. So I think that's a interesting, one of the interesting points to point out also. Pete opposes free universal health care and debt forgiveness, and a lot of people in our community are struggling to make ends meet. I don't know, maybe we can elaborate more on the points that are listed out on the site.
Yeah. Well, along with like the healthcare aspect, I haven't touched on this yet, but there's a lot of people in the LGBTQ community that are, they have disabilities, and I don't think that Pete thinks about that. Like, it just shows that he doesn't consider all the facets.
Very ableist.
Yeah, very, like, all the facets of people and identities of people that are going to suffer due to his policies. And I just cannot believe how much he exploits this one piece of identity that he holds now, and really uses it to his benefit. Because I do feel like a lot of the moms out there that have the gay son, this is their comfort zone, is Pete. Pete is a war hero. He's well-to-do. He went to school, and, he's now mayor, and it's like, oh, he's a safe bet. But he's not actually. And you're right about the deportations. Like, I think I actually am like pretty surprised at how how much he almost is aligned with Trump in some way. Like, at least maybe he's complicit. So I know that that's super important, especially since Chicago has so many organizing groups around immigration, that this is like a huge, huge no-no for us. And then let's see, what other? So, like, the other thing that I want to mention is, so are you familiar with Eric Logan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was a big
That's
concern.
Big concern.
Yeah. So Eric Logan was shot by a police officer, a white police officer. There was something like 8 meetings held by the town, the city, to address the police brutality regarding Eric Logan. And Pete, I think, was present at maybe one of those. And he said the reason he wasn't really involved was because he didn't want to bring media attention in a certain way. I don't really know.
Sounds familiar. Sounds like someone we know. Maybe sounds like Rahm Emanuel.
Yeah, so he just totally, like, didn't acknowledge that. He didn't seem maybe, I don't know him, but it didn't seem like he was at all apologetic or empathetic of the situation. And, like, this was an opportunity for him to really, like, show that he can represent a community that's marginalized all the time, which are Black folks by the police all the time. So I just think that it's interesting he hasn't really owned up to that big mistake he made. And, like, if he really wanted to show that he's a good person, that he would actually, like, focus on doing that as mayor and not running a campaign that's half-assed.
Yeah, maybe not demolishing Black homes.
Yeah,
in your community, just because they didn't, fix a paint chip, or something. They couldn't afford to get their homes, like, repainted or something. But also, members of the Queers Against Pete disrupted one of his events, and they called him out on it, on this Eric Logan subject, and he didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. He totally went around it, didn't want to answer it. They got the people that were there were very hostile to the
very physically in people's spaces too.
Pointing in their faces.
Touching too.
Touching.
Like, yeah, my friend actually, like, got really upset and, like, chewed this one woman out. It was pretty funny.
Yeah.
What was that? Can you describe how the disruption took place?
Yeah, I wasn't there, but I did see the video, and I know that there was some pre-planning to go, and I don't know if they were trying to keep it small to like not draw too much attention. But it was, I would say, a decent enough crowd to disrupt, and they went in and they had a few signs, but that wasn't the main part of holding signs. It was really to try to get in line to ask questions,
Right.
because what I think the group goal was to point out the mishaps of Pete's campaign, or the the gaps that he has of like not actually following through on a lot of what he says. And the thing is when my friend was supposed to be able to answer a question, it kind of seemed like they diverted, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, but this person that I know finally was trying to draw attention that like it's their turn to ask a question, and that was when really commotion started, because when it was brought up, it totally got, like you said, it got kind of diverted and didn't get answered. And so that's kind of when this person just started shouting facts about Eric Logan and Pete's history.
I think I saw that too.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, and just a
great.
lot of and really calling out the fact that you say you are a member of this community, but you don't acknowledge so many of the people, and it's liberation for all. So
Right.
It's like black bodies, black lives
Yes.
are liberation for the LGBTQ community too, and you have to acknowledge that they all overlap, and that he doesn't. He doesn't see the path.
Yeah.
Or like the work.
The
of that.
connection.
The connection. Thank you.
Yeah. Our oppression are connected, and
Yeah.
there won't be any liberation for anybody if we're not doing
Our
it.
struggles are tied. Yeah.
Our struggles are tied, and we also do that on this show. We also connect it with animal oppression as well. Non-human animals, it's very connected. Without animal liberation, we can't liberate ourselves as well. There's very deep connections to all of our oppressions, because it's all at one source, and it's the
Right.
capitalist system.
Yeah, the source is almost always the same.
Yeah.
For all oppressed groups. That's what's kind of shocking, why, that people look at them in compartments and don't want to see the whole. If they just forget about like the oppressed groups and just look at who the source of oppression is, it's almost always the same for all of those groups.
It's all
It's kind of crazy that, people
same road.
are like, so much trying to divide those things and say, oh, you shouldn't compare, you shouldn't look at them all the same.
Right.
Or we're not looking at them all the same. We're just connecting. We're seeing that there's a similar source. That's all we're saying a lot of times. And people just get crazy about it.
Right. It's they kind of like individualize the
Like Joaquin, Phoenix's, the response to Phoenix's acceptance speech at the Oscars is a prime example of like how that gets under people's skin, and for some reason it really bothers them that we would even dare to include other species like in a discussion about oppression. It's like, well, why? Just because they're not human, they shouldn't even be given any consideration we don't even want to put ourselves in that arena.
It just reveals their bigotry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a little off topic.
Well, they're all
But
connected,
me.
so it's all
Yeah,
connected. So it's a good point to make. Is there any upcoming actions that your group is planning? The Queers Against Pete
I don't know.
I know, because it's so new. So
Yeah. I would imagine there's probably going to be at least an event, in the next few months. I can't imagine not. But there's also a lot of other events that I could suggest. Like I think there's I can't remember the exact name, but it's like the Poor People's March. And it's being organized here in the Midwest. And I know that there's folks like that are going to bus to, I can't remember what state, but there's going to be like a pretty large march, and I'm sure it's going to address a lot of the candidates who are not, and no one's a perfect candidate, for
right.
the election, but definitely, I think it'll call out Pete a lot, especially if he's still in the picture big time. We'll see after New Hampshire, I guess. Or we'll see after some other caucuses, too. But yeah.
Super Tuesday, like Andersonville. That,
Yeah.
like,
So
talk about normative, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I live there, so like, but the impression I get is an older gay community that really wants to conform to like straight society, because like, you know, you have the house and the kids, and you know, it's almost like they're just trying to emulate a lot of times like what they saw, that's just like we're supposed to aspire to that.
right. So
In a place like that, how would you appeal to this campaign?
yes,
Benj?
I know. Because how can we go into like a place like Boys Town and have people that are, you know, frequent Boys Town who also support Pete Buttigieg see
Just
these,
because
just
gay.
because he's gay, see these points that your campaign lists out so well on the website at queersagainstpete.com. How do you think we can convince them? How can your campaign convince them to realize the issues with homonormativity and what Pete Buttigieg represents?
Yeah, so I mean, from being an organizer, I think the best way we can do that is honestly through relationship building. And we don't have a lot of time to become best friends with everybody in Boys Town, but I'm sure that there's networks of people like that own businesses in Boys Town that could start like endorsing. I mean, I don't know. I feel like a lot of businesses are putting signs up, so I don't think there's anything opposed to that. But I would even start there of just trying to figure out, you know, are these businesses aligned with Pete? Because a lot of people see that, and honestly, they are influenced by it. I also think that just talking to people and turning it back on how it's ridiculous, but like you have to turn it back on someone to be able to how to show them how they're affected, or to put it in their sort of perspective to see, oh wow, like now I understand. Versus, you know, I think this is sort of like an individualist, also like Western way of the way a lot of people are here, is that you can't see the effect of how someone is struggling unless it's like presented to you in a way that personal. So I just think that the best thing you can do is talk to people and encourage them to talk to the next person. And like, it's honestly very basic, but it's the more you do it, the better. And like I said, as much as you can, like get people to sign the letter, share the letter, keep it really like, I like the words homonormative and the words we're using, but I think people get really almost like distanced away. Like they like can't.
It's like too academic.
It's a little too academic, and it feels like, at least to me, I feel like if I heard that and I didn't know what it meant, like I would not know how to connect with the person. And so like, yeah, again, you're not like dumbing it down, but you are trying to meet people where they're at. And if they are like defensive about stuff, you have to try to present it differently. And that's like so much of campaigning. And I would say like donate money to the campaigns that are going right now too, or to organizing groups beyond Queers Against Pete that are doing work. Because at the other level of this is like Queers Against Pete is grassroots, and the most effective work that's going to keep getting done is at the local level. So I'm not saying that hopefully like Pete is going to like get elected, but you know, at the end of the day, like I said, there's no perfect candidate, and we have to focus on our local grassroots communities too. And
Right.
you know, these bigger picture things aren't going to unlayer themselves or unfold completely without a lot of work at the local level first. So that was a long answer, but there you go.
That was great. I completely agree. Grassroots, you know, getting people involved and informed in our community and beyond that. So we thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
Remind everybody where they could find this campaign.
You can probably find it on a lot of social media. I'm not a big social media user, so you could find it at their website, which is probably like queersagainstpete.com.
.com.
And then probably like Facebook and the hashtag Queers Against Pete. I know that they're pretty like on Twitter a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely check out the website because they'll have more of those plugins for where you can find that stuff.
Yeah. Again, so we're very happy that this campaign exists. We support it, and we are Queers Against Pete as well. And we advocate anyone that's watching this to go to the queersagainstpete.com to find out more information. Sign the letter, share it on social media, and let's get more people involved with this campaign and to make sure homonormative Obama doesn't get into office, which is what Pete represents pretty much.
Center, black and brown, queer and trans people always.
Yes.
Think about who is most affected.
Yeah.
This is what that campaign is.
They've always been the true revolutionaries in our community, and they should be always at the forefront.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.